Welcome, everyone, to the Friday, June 18th edition of the Signals from Mars live stream, brought to you by the Mars Attacks podcast and by my web design company, vmrit.com. Check that out if you're looking for any web design needs. We were supposed to have Rob Rowe on tonight. Unfortunately, he had a death in the family. Rob, I hope you and your family are doing well. And coming in off the bench, all the way up in the UK, all the way up from me in the UK, anyways, north of me, Mr. Jeremy Weltman. How are you, sir?
Yeah, hi, Victor. I'm really good, thanks. Yeah.
Awesome. I always identify you with Manchester because obviously you like Manchester City.
Yeah.
But how far are you actually from Manchester?
Okay. Well, I'm actually in a place called Northwich, which is in Cheshire.
Okay.
And I'm about 20 odd miles away from Manchester and about the
Okay.
same distance from Liverpool. So I'm sort of, equidistant. We're actually not far from Stoke as well. So we're very sort of central between the three places.
Oh, cool. So that means that if anyone brought up the Mersey sound to you, you would be very familiar with it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Liverpool music's had a big influence over here. Manchester music is a big influence.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
Stoke has its influence as well because you have Slash is originally from there.
Absolutely, and Lemmy as well.
That's
Lemmy's
right.
got
Yeah.
sort of a Stoke connection, and I think he also went and moved out to North Wales, which isn't far away.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's quite a lot of music around where I live, but not so much in Cheshire itself. It's more rural and quieter, really.
Cool. So I mean, at least you're at a distance where if you want to see shows, I mean, 20 miles isn't that bad.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the time now, I would sort of, I could jump on a train to go and watch a gig. I would drive to go and watch a gig. So yeah, there's lots of places around. I mean, I go to Chester, I go to Liverpool, I go to Manchester. So I don't have to go as far as Birmingham. I have been to the odd gig in Birmingham and the odd gig in London, but yeah, most of them are in those places.
London is roughly how far for you?
So London is about 220 miles away. You get on a train from Crewe and it takes about 2 hours.
Okay. It's not too bad.
Yeah, you can do it. I mean, it's not bad. You would stay overnight if you want to go and watch a concert down there. Been to Hyde Park and watched Aerosmith down there, so that was good.
Cool. I want to say hello to Johan up in Sweden, who was actually chatting with me during the England-Scotland game via Facebook, and Rob, who has joined the chat as well. Yeah, we'll have Rob on at some other point in time. But anyway, what's your first? Well, let me start out with this. When we talked about Maiden, when you were on a few weeks ago, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is because of my situation where I grew up in the U.S. to Spanish parents and spending summers in Spain. I knew that the cultures were different musically and how you got introduced to bands and what bands were big also varied. Because I remember every year when I would come, especially in my teenage years, there would be friends that would say, "Oh, what band is big in America?" Because I want to know who they are before they break here. And I remember one year I came with the first Poison album, and I had this friend, and he says, "So they'll never be big here." Next summer I come, he had a jean jacket with a Poison logo on the back, similar to the one that we were showing off on Twitter. The next year it was Guns N' Roses, shortly after Appetite for Destruction came out, before they even were big in the States. Eddie Trunk in the States was playing them, and I had a friend that had already purchased the cassette based on seeing Welcome to the Jungle, I don't know how many months before the Sweet Child of Mine video and song blew up. So that next summer, I came with Guns N' Roses, and he says to me, that band is never going to be big. Sure as shit. Next year, that poison patch was gone, and it was the big Guns N' Roses logo with the two pistols and the roses around there. So it was cool to hear your interpretation of how the rise of Maiden happened on your end, as opposed to what it was like for us.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to get into music? Like, what was that first band that kind of hooked you and made you a fan?
If you're talking about music generally, I was
Mhm.
into a lot of stuff before metal. So I
Okay.
started off with disco and punk, that sort of
Mhm.
stuff. But I think we'll move on a little bit and just talk about the metal, because this was
Okay.
a real thing in my life when I was 13 years old, I think it would be, yeah. And you talk about 1980, and suddenly all these bands came out. And for
Right.
me, it was Saxon.
Okay.
Saxon's Wheels of Steel. And in fact, I thought you were going to ask me this. So I actually have the original single that I bought in 1980. And there it
Wow.
is. That
Oh,
is
wow.
the single that I bought, Wheels of Steel. And even to this day, I still love this single.
Cool.
I love it more than any other record that I've ever bought.
Mhm.
So Saxon were really big for British rockers, people
Right.
getting into metal. There was just something about the riff. You heard a guitar riff, you heard that Wheels of Steel chorus, and it was just fantastic. And I just thought,
Right.
this is the music for me. There was a switch that suddenly clicked in my head. I'd heard a bit of rock before, I'd heard Led
Right.
Zeppelin, I'd heard the Rolling Stones, I'd heard, all this sort of famous bands,
Mhm.
mainly borrowed albums from my auntie or from, friends or whatever. But this was a new band that suddenly came from nowhere. I mean, obviously they'd released their first album before Wheels of Steel, but it
Right.
didn't really sell very well. It wasn't very popular. They hadn't really got the music together. They hadn't, formulated what they wanted to do.
Mhm.
But Wheels of Steel, they just got it right. And so this really hit me on the head, and said, "This is what you're going to like from now on." And there were other things out at the same time. I mean, Judas Priest were out at the same
Sure.
time. Iron Maiden, obviously AC/DC were really big. Black Sabbath,
Mhm.
all the big names that you can think of. I was into Deep Purple, Rainbow, Whitesnake. Uh, but I think Saxon were the band, and I've always followed them. I've always
Mhm.
kept them going, and even now they're still going. They're still producing good music.
Right. Yeah, and they we have it's not a solo album because Biff already did a solo album, but that Heavy Water album that he's doing with his son,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
we've heard from it so far sounds pretty cool.
yeah,
And that's coming out, I think, in the next few weeks, if I'm not mistaken. I don't
yeah,
have
yeah,
the release schedule in front of me, but I've started to get the promos in. I got the promo earlier this week, so that means that it's, I mean, a week or two away from coming out, more than likely. But I mean, that first single had that big, heavy riff, and with Biff's voice over top of it was really cool.
yeah, yeah. I think he's really enjoying it, and obviously it was something he wanted to do during lockdown. He's
Right.
spending time with his son. His son's obviously changing what he's doing, and it sounds good. Yeah, yeah. I'll be interested to hear the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Saxon, I mean, for me, is a band that I got into because of coming to Spain. I mean, I knew who they were. I'd always heard the name, and I remember that I want to say hello to Gabriel. A cousin of Gabriel's lent me a tape, a cassette, and it had Saxon's Crusader on it. It had Judas Priest Free Will Burning. It had The Prisoner by Iron Maiden. I think it had Carry On by Manowar. And I don't remember much more of that cassette, but it was my first introduction to anything by Saxon.
Mm.
And since then, I mean, they're the band that I've accidentally seen the most in
Right.
concert, where, you know, I've gone to see Judas Priest. Well, and it was Saxon and Motorhead opening up. I went to a festival fairly close to me. They were closing the whole festival down. I went to another festival in Madrid. Saxon was there as well. So they've always, I think, for the most part, maintained their popularity throughout Europe. Whereas in the States, of course, Denim and Leather and Dallas 3 p.m. and stuff like that has always been huge. Crusaders, another one. You know, all their big hits were big hits in the States amongst metal fans. Um, and I think they really had a resurgence in the mid to late 90s when they put out stuff like Killing Ground and stuff like that, where the band kind of um, uh, updated their sound, would you say, or kind of made it more modern to fit in with what other bands were doing? And also there was the whole split
Yeah.
with the camps, and Biff kind of went with it with a heavier approach. It was obviously still his vocals and still very much seated in what he had done, but at the same time, you know, he was modernizing the sound to kind of make sure that the band got to newer ears. So I think that was smart by him.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before that, they actually went on TV here. I don't know if you ever saw it, with a famous promoter whose
Okay.
name has just eluded me, but it'll come back to me in a minute. And he was trying to change them, and Biff
Okay.
was resisting it, and it was very interesting how they were doing it. But since then, what happened was Saxon went very downhill for a while, as you know, and
Right.
they're playing smaller and smaller audiences, and yeah, they'd lost their way a little bit, I think. And they went through this sort of TV change, but they came out the other side and decided, I think, that they were going to do what they wanted to do and not what
Mhm.
the promoter wanted to do. And that was quite interesting. And like you say, I think they changed their sound. They became well, it became a little bit more metally, I think, rather
Right.
than just sort of straight up rock.
Mhm.
And it worked. But they've always plugged away. You know, they've always played the European festival circuit.
Right.
They've always had that sort of fan base that have always liked them. And I think that then they soared on the wave of popularity for metal, which has suddenly taken off again, you know, in
Mhm.
recent years, because people realize that, you know, they can still make great music.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think the last couple of albums, I know some people think, you know, that they're not great, but I really like them. I think, you know, the last couple of albums have been really good.
Yeah, I think each one of their albums have, over the last few, have all had some pretty good tracks on them. To, as I like to say, when I write up the new releases post, I always say, well, if I can take 5 or 6 songs and throw them into my Saxon playlist, for example, that
Mm.
means that that's a good album for me. You know,
Yeah,
it means
yeah.
that it's, you know, as opposed to some bands where, you know, they come out and they've got just the one song and everything is like a variation of that one song after. So,
Yeah, and on the very latest album, The Secret Flight, I absolutely love that song. I mean, I just think it's brilliant.
right.
You know, it's just hits me, and I think, oh yeah, great. Do more of that, please, because it's superb.
Yeah, I think, and we've talked about, for example, on the Patreon page, about a band like Magnum, for example. Magnum is another band that I didn't know about till I came to Europe, till I
Right.
started vacationing here as a teen, because I never knew who they were there. And I remember seeing, you know, pictures in the magazines of this band that had this guy with this big, long ZZ Top like beard. I'm like, no one in metal has a beard like that. You know, lo and behold, how many years later, you know, how many people have those kind of beards now? So he was ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I mean, Magnum are one of my favorite bands. They just, again, I got into them very early. I think it was the Changes. They did a Changes single,
Okay.
which was, I mean, we're talking right back in the sort of Kingdom of Madness Magnum 2 days. And I think there was a live album,
Mhm.
Marauder they brought out.
Okay.
And a friend of mine lent me the single changes, and I thought, yeah, I quite like this. I like the singer, I like this singer, Bob Catley. He's interesting.
Mhm.
And then they brought out another few albums after that, and they became very famous actually for a while. They, you know,
Mhm.
they were playing Hammersmith Odeon. They sold out 3 nights on the
Right.
trot. So we're talking now forwarding to sort of 1988, that sort of time, 86, 88. Wings
Mhm.
of Heaven, the album came out. And yeah, they were doing really well. But I've always followed them, and they're still playing even today and in the early 70s. Bob's voice is a little bit croakier now, but I still
Right.
think I think he's one of the, you know, one of the great singers that people have overlooked. You know, and of course they're from Birmingham, from one of the heartlands of rock and roll, as you know, with Diamond
Yep.
Head and Black Sabbath and Priest. It's you know, a lot of bands that come from that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Another band that again was always big here, but they're more of a rock band. How big is Status Quo in
Ah,
the UK?
yeah, huge.
Huge.
But funnily enough, there are people who don't like rock or metal,
Mhm.
but like Status Quo. And the reason is, you can go to any party, they'll put on
Right.
Status Quo, and everyone will hit the dance floor. They'll
Right.
all do that, you know, the Status Quo, the, you know, the moving of the arms and the legs, and uh, I reckon my parents know Status Quo. I mean, that's how ubiquitous they are. You know, they're well known. You know, rocking all over the world,
Right.
Caroline, Sweet, and they're famous songs. And yeah, they're a British institution, really.
Yeah.
But of course, now that you know, they've lost their way now. I mean, it's a shame, really, because you know the original members have either died or obviously left, and it's a different thing. But yeah, in the day they were huge, and they were on a program called Top of the Pops here, which was on a
Mhm.
Thursday night, and that was the place to be if you wanted to sort of air what you were doing
Right.
in the public domain. Everybody watched Top of the Pops. I mean, when I say everybody, we're talking 50 million people would watch that on a Thursday night. I mean, it
Right.
was huge. We only had 3 channels at the time, you know,
Right.
and at one point. And so, yeah, it was really popular, and Status Quo were a big act on that.
Yeah. Well, when we would come over to Spain as kids, we had 2 channels, and it was funny because I remember what a shock it was that 11 o'clock rolled around. All of a sudden, you heard the national anthem, the flag went up, and then it was just the flag in silence until about 1 a.m. And then after 1 a.m., you got the 5 stripes. The I forget the actual name of it,
Yeah,
but it's like the standby like graphic that they use for everything. So it was that until 8 a.m. the next morning. It
that's
was
right.
such a culture shock. It's like, wait a second, we could get up and watch TV if we couldn't sleep in the States, and now we're here, we're stuck. What are we supposed to do all night? So thankfully, you grow up a music fan, you could throw on, you know, some music and fall asleep to that. But so that
Yeah,
was
we had similar thing. We had the test card. Yeah, it would just be a horrible piercing sound that would go through the
right.
night, and you see this girl there who's probably now 92, and she was there. I think she was holding a teddy bear, and there'd be sort of like monochrome things all around her, and that you'd just be watching that all night if you were on the sofa.
Amazing. See, so people that grew up in our age group in the States, you guys don't realize how lucky you were. You didn't have to put up with that. And this was all pre VHS, pre being able to throw a DVD on or anything like that. It was take it or leave
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
it. I'm trying to think what other bands. Well, we were talking before on Facebook, Johan and myself, about the new Halloween album, and
Hmm.
that's another band. And actually, I'm glad that my cousin Gabriel is on here because the two of us were massive Halloween fans to the point where I remember going to an amusement park with him, and he was wearing a Halloween shirt, and one of the ride attendants said to us, "Oh my God, you know who Halloween is?" And it was like one of these things where, after the Two Keepers albums came out, they didn't have distribution in the States, and the music landscape had shifted. So if you were a diehard, sure, you could get, an import or whatever, but the guy was amazed that we knew who that band was. There were so many bands in Europe that unfortunately didn't make it over. And I guess to an extent, there may have been bands from the US that were big that didn't make their way over to Europe, but it's kind of different because I think you had a lot of bands that were still featured in magazines, because if you look at someone like Rush, who we've talked about plenty of times, or you look at even a Van Halen, both bands had zero presence in Europe for the longest time. I mean, if you think about it, Rush played some shows before the end of the band, but I think it was like 20 years since they had played anywhere in Europe. Van Halen was similar. I mean, there was the constant rumor that with David Lee Roth being back, that they were going to play some festivals, but it never materialized. So even though those were known entities and there were other bands similar, maybe not as big or not as, household names for us music fans, I'm sure that there were other bands that didn't traverse from the US over. You mentioned Aerosmith before. What's the first American band that kind of caught your eye?
Well, it's interesting because we got into all the British stuff very early '80s, and then as the '80s sort of wore on, all the hair metal was over in the UK, and we were flooded with American bands, and I liked a lot of that stuff. I'm trying to think the very first. I think Van Halen were probably one of the first. I mean, I remember when the first album came out. A friend of mine had the album and played it to me, and it just blew my mind. It was incredible.
Right.
And I remember buying Diver Down, which a lot of people complain about because it's a bit of a hodgepodge album, as we know. But I really enjoyed that. And Dave Lee Roth had a presence over in the UK. We used to watch the odd program where you'd see him,
Right.
and he was such a character, and we'd wonder what was going on, and he was amazing. And we knew about Kiss. Kiss were big. You'd see Kiss shirts in the shops in the UK. So, American music was very, very popular in the UK. I'd say that a lot of people used to like American rock music more than British rock music at the time. Aerosmith were huge. I'm trying to think of some of the other. I mean, we had all of them: Poison, Motley Crue. They were all really big, and of course, MTV was a big thing. We had MTV.
Right.
Everybody was watching that. Cable TV suddenly came in with MTV, and then that was it.
Right.
All those bands became famous.
Yeah, and your MTV, because up until there were geo blocking became a thing with satellite. I mean, I was getting MTV, and Scuzz was maybe another channel that we would get. That was all hard rock and metal and punk and stuff like that. VH1, obviously, and this was, I think, like 4 or 5 years ago. Whereas in the States, they stopped playing music videos. In Europe, they were still playing music videos. And now, for example, I have a variation of MTV that's from Spain, but it's all like Geordie Shore and, that kind of reality TV. But we have an application where you can pick like 4 videos and then it creates a playlist based on that. But it's kind of dumb because you'll pick, Slipknot, and you'll pick Metallica and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden they'll throw in, Bad Bunny or stuff like that. And it's like, well, that doesn't kind of fit into what I was picking. So, that kind of doesn't make sense. My story regarding Diver Down is the following. As a kid, whenever we would go someplace on vacation or go visit someplace, I'd always check out the music stores, and I'd want to bring something back to say, I bought this in such and such a city. or if it wasn't a cassette or a CD, it was a T-shirt, something along those lines. We visited a country that a lot of people in the States probably don't even know exists. It's between Spain and France, called Andorra. And I had to get a cassette. It was the only thing I could afford out of the money that I had at the time, and Diver Down was what I picked up. So and I've always had fond memories of that. I will actually say that is the first song the first song off of that. The cover of the Kinks' "Where Have All the Good Times Gone" is the first song that my wife and I, when we were dating, actually connected over. So there's extra sentimental value to that album. And I know, as you said, a lot of people have issues with it, but I've always enjoyed it.
Yeah, same here. I like it when you've got albums that are a little bit mixed sometimes, and they mix up the songs. But I think the cover songs on it were good, and
Right.
I think it stands the test of time. It's good album.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. You've gone to a lot of festivals over the years. You've gone to a lot by yourself, and you've also admitted that you've gone to quite a few with your daughters as well. So, I mean, is when you go to the shows with your daughters, is it to kind of take advantage and see bands as well, or is it to kind of chaperone the situation to make sure that everything is fine?
I've been at the right age with my daughter, so it's mainly my eldest daughter. She used to like metal quite a bit, and
Okay.
we went to High Volt. We used to go to this festival called High Voltage in London.
Okay.
And it was a decent one. It was in Victoria Park, which is I think it's it's sort of East London.
Okay.
And they had on a really, really good bill every time. We went sort of 3 years running. Judas Priest would be headlining one year. It was Schenker was on.
Okay.
Foreigner were on. They had all the big bands on. And she was getting into some of this stuff, and it was great, really, going with her and just enjoying the music together, which is a great thing. I mean, we've been to see Iron Maiden together as well, indoors, but at the festivals, it's a great family thing. I think at festivals you can take your kids there and have a good day out. But I have been, as you say, mostly on my own, and mostly to either Bloodstock or Download is the main one.
Right.
But also Rambling Man Fair, which is in Maidstone in Kent, in the east of England. And again, that was the sort of follow-on from the one I was telling you about in London, which sort of folded, and then they reopened in Maidstone. But obviously, Download is the big one. And there's seen lots of great bands there. And I'd still go, I'd still want to go. And I always thought that, as you get older, you wouldn't want to go to a festival. It's for young people, but it's not. It's for everyone.
It's for everyone.
That's a great thing. There's all age groups there, and it's fantastic. Problem at Download is there's always a bit of rain.
Right.
It never shines. The sun never shines for the whole weekend. But you usually get a bit of sun. But as you probably see it on the TV sometimes, I mean, Iron Maiden had a show there, and I think half the crowd had left halfway through because it was so muddy and so wet.
Right.
You can't even enjoy it. It's so bad. But when the sun shines there and there's a good band on, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, as a kid, it was always the whole Castle Donington thing was such a big deal. And, I remember reading about it in magazines, and then you'd see the Monsters of Rock tour where the headliner would then continue out. I mean, I remember it was a year that Metallica had headlined, I believe. And then, so this was probably around the Black Album. And then the tour throughout Europe was Metallica, Dio, I think it was Queensryche and Warrior Soul or something like that. And I was like, this is amazing. Where can we go? And of course, nowhere near Spain. They weren't coming anywhere near where we were. Either that, or by the time we got here on vacation, they had already come through. So it never worked out till as a kid that we could see any of that stuff. But you're right. You go to these shows and you see people of all ages. It's really amazing how that happens. Because I think they're smart enough to mix things up so that you want to bring in as many people as possible, and then people get turned on to different bands as a result. We've had discussions in Patreon several times about the band Royal Blood, and you mentioned that you stumbled upon them by seeing them live at, what was it, Leeds or Reading?
Yeah, it was Leeds, yeah, which is the partner festival of Reading, yeah.
Right.
And that was a really good festival. I'd recommend that if anybody comes over to the UK or is in the UK. A really good festival, very well run, easy to get round. Metallica were headlining, but they were the best band on. Royal Blood were amazing. Just two guys, and just the sound was superb. Really blew my mind, and I'd never heard them really properly before then. They were great, but also in a tent that day were Ghost, just in a tent. I wandered in. There must have been, maybe a few hundred people in a large tent, and they were incredible as well.
Right.
So
wow.
it was a good day. And I got dragged along. I mean, my daughter wanted to go really, and she said, "Should we go to this festival?" And I said, "This was the week before," and I said, "Yeah, okay, the weather looks good. Let's go. Let's get tickets. I'll drive." And turned out to be one of the greats.
Cool. Yeah, they just announced that Metallica's playing here next year in Madrid, and it's for a new 4-day festival. And I looked at the bill, and you would think that if you have a bunch of metal bands, wouldn't it make more sense to put them together as opposed to spread them out over 4 days? Because you have Metallica playing one day, you have Faith No More a different day, you have Deftones a different day, you have I think Metallica's playing with Placebo, and I forgot who the other band was. It may be Royal Blood as well. Royal Blood is sprinkled in there somewhere. But I was looking at the bill and I'm like, this is madness, because a lot of these bands don't go together. I mean, it's one thing where I've been to a festival where you have Hatebreed, for example, or Suicidal Tendencies, and you have Journey on the same bill. So at least, when Journey was on this bill, they were smart enough to play more of their, rock songs. They didn't play any ballads. They kind of knew the challenge that they had in front of them. So they went out there just to kick ass, and I was impressed. I thought it was a really good show. And when you're mixing in with like some of these pop bands, it doesn't make sense, especially if you're going to have Metallica come on at like 12 at night. You're going to be sitting through, 12 hours of stuff that doesn't interest you. Then they wonder why people just show up the last 2 hours of that day. I mean, it doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether the organizers sometimes, because they have different stages, they want you to move around a bit. So they sometimes, they know that they'll put on something on the bill, and then the next act is not in, it's nowhere near the same genre. So you'll move off. You'll walk around the festival and do something else. And so maybe they want, that churn going on rather than everybody just parking in front of the one stage. Maybe that's maybe part of it.
It could be.
Yeah, but it's quite an art, isn't it, putting together a bill which everybody wants to see.
Yeah, the last festival that I saw in Madrid, I actually had a little bit of a row with the organizers. They wouldn't allow me to have press passes because they said I wasn't from a national outlet. So I wasn't given any access to that. But aside from that, their propaganda was, I questioned them big time, because initially they said, oh, well, you know, where we're moving the festival to will fit 11,000 people, and it will be this and it will be that. And when it was all said and done, they were saying, oh, there was 55,000 people to see Metallica. It's like, wait a second. Didn't this only hold 11,000? How did you fit 55,000 people in there? You know, there was like they inflated a lot of stuff, and they were known for that. And, you know, outside of one festival that this company runs, like every other festival that they've done has folded. There's one big festival here, one big metal festival. And actually, no, there's a few, I should say. There's like 3 or 4. They're all independent, though. They were all put together by fans, and they've grown little by little, which is, in my opinion, what you need. If you look at, you know, sure, Download, previously Monsters of Rock, it didn't happen overnight. It grew, you know, little by little. And what they were trying to do with these like pop-up festivals, like the last one that I saw was Sonosphere. It's like, wait a second, but the Sonosphere name comes from England. They bought the, you know, the rights to the name, and they, you know, there was this whole rigmarole with it. And it was just crazy. It you know, you were there, and it was okay. They just threw this together to make as much money as possible without thinking, okay, our long-term goal is to run this festival like a Leeds or like something like that, or like a Reading that's been around for decades. You know, it's part of the problem that they have here. It's I think a lot of the organizers are just looking at the cash grab. Even Ticketmaster or Live Nation tried to do a festival 2 years ago, and I don't remember what name they used, but it was a name that was big throughout Europe or the States. It was already an established name, and it's as if, oh, you know, just because we're using this name, it's going to attract people. But they had a bill where they had bands that were already playing at a bunch of other festivals. So it kind of, you know, if you've already seen the band at 3 other festivals, what's going to make you pay a lot of money to see them be the, you know, the closing act at a festival? It doesn't make sense to me. So.
Yeah, the other thing is, I think we're getting flooded with festivals now. I mean, you know, there's a huge amount of festivals in the UK, loads and loads of smaller festivals, and they do have some of the, you know, sort of the big, medium to large acts on, and you're wondering how they make it pay, really. I mean, some of these festivals, you know, they're looking at maybe 5,000 fans, 10,000 fans at most, you know, going to them. I wonder how they make it pay, really. I think we've got too many going on, but I suppose the best will always win out, and you know, you're always going to have a Download, and you're always going to have, you know, you're always going to have a Reading and a Leeds, and so those ones will always be there with the big names on.
Yeah, that's without even considering what's the biggest is Glastonbury, but even that, what I don't get, which is what Wacken did years ago. Wacken decided, okay, this is our limit. We're not taking any more than, I think they're set it's 50 or 80,000 people can go. And they realized that they could have, you know, just let the doors open and let as many people as they want come in, like they do with Glastonbury. But Glastonbury, every 4 years, they shut it down for a year just to do maintenance, just to clean, just to upgrade things. And what Wacken does is keep things smaller so that every year they can ensure that, you know, unless it rains, similar to what you're saying with Download, they can improve the facilities. They can, you know, do things like have beer stands in the middle of the field where they have they have this amazing beer tap system which runs beneath the field in Wacken to ensure that everyone has beer there. So you know, there's the infrastructure, again, put together by 3 friends who are just music fans, and it just grew little by little, and ultimately well, ultimately you can argue that it's the biggest metal festival in Europe. So,
yeah. That's certainly one of my favorite albums is Heaven and Hell live at Wacken.
Yeah, you've brought that up several times.
Yeah, what a great album.
They just announced, I guess it was yesterday, Hellfest 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still blown over by that. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, just to see all those bands.
350 bands.
Over
7 days,
two weekends.
Yeah, it is 2 weekends.
Yeah.
But I mean, realistically, if you want to make that a vacation, what do? You start your vacation at the first weekend, see France for a few days in between, and then come back for the following weekend.
Yeah, but in the middle of it, you have to go to the ear doctor because your ears are blown.
And I think the only band that repeats, I was looking at the list, I think is Killing Joke is the only one that plays both weekends. Right, so it's amazing. So, I mean, they're making up for 2 years of not having a festival.
That's it. That's obvious. It. Yeah,
because they usually have like around 80 bands. It's usually 4 days, and it's usually around 80 bands what they have.
Yeah. I've not looked yet to see how much it is to go, and if you went for the whole, the whole lot. And I wasn't sure whether you can actually go to the whole lot, or whether a few of the days are reserved for people who maybe have got tickets previously and weren't able to go. So I was trying to find out, and then I clicked through, and I think there was a blank page, and I couldn't find out any more about it. I mean, I was kind of interested in going, but then I thought, well, it's going to be very expensive to go there, and France is not cheap anyway once you get there. But the bands that they're on is just incredible.
Yes.
I mean, Guns N' Roses are not cheap. I mean, Metallica are not cheap. I mean, they're going to take huge amounts of cash out of that. How many people do you think will go to that? It's going to be full, isn't it? For every day.
They always sell out. The last Hellfest, so it's 2 years off. 2019, when they closed the festival, before they closed the festival, they had, similar to what happens with Download and Wacken, they sell out in the next year.
Right.
So, I mean, they're established festivals that have that brand where you're already expecting a certain quality with what they're going to present. So you can take that gamble. You can take that risk. It's not where 1 year you've got Metallica and Guns N' Roses, and then the next year you're going to have, Faster Pussycat or LA Guns headlining. No offense to those bands or their fans, but obviously they're at a different level than a Guns N' Roses and a Metallica. But
yeah, this is the festival to end all festivals. I mean, I wonder how they're ever going to come back from this the following year and put on a festival that's as good.
and you could be right. It could be that these bands were contracted to, maybe it was, and I haven't looked at it, maybe, one weekend was 2020 and the other one was 2021. And they're just grouping both together. Because I'm sure what'll end up happening, because if bands don't play a date, they have to pay. They have to give money back, especially if they've received in advance. So I'm assuming that a lot of these bands probably already got paid for a previous year. So they have, bands are going to be making up all these dates that they've missed anyway.
Yeah.
And these festival dates are routed based on, where they're going to play in between. They usually lock down the festivals, and then they kind of connect the dots in between.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think that obviously you're going to get a lot of those headliners as well. They're going to be playing in the UK. They're going to be playing other festivals, because they all do the same sort of festival circuit through the summer, don't they? So I mean, you're looking at I can't remember all of the headliners there, but obviously we know Metallica, Guns N' Roses. I saw Whitesnake was sort of on the bill. All the big names are on there, really. Alice Cooper was on there as well, I think. They just had everything.
Just the two biggest names, or okay, the biggest names, and they're the ones that have their logos. So the first Friday the 17th, it is. Well, I don't understand French. It says something about October 2019, but anyway, so that Friday, Deftones, Dropkick Murphys, Volbeat, Five Finger Death Punch, Suicidal Tendencies, Electric Wizard, Obituary, and Mayhem. Those are the headliners of every stage.
Yeah.
Saturday's Faith No More, Megadeth, Deep Purple, Airborne, Social Distortion, Envy, who I've never heard of, Sepultura, and Vreed. And that stage with Sepultura is ridiculous. It's Sepultura, Sacred Reich, Flotsam and Jetsam, Exciter, Eccentrics. It's 80s thrash galore. I mean, that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That Sunday, it is Avenged Sevenfold, Korn, Judas Priest, Running Wild, Walls of Jericho, Killing Joke, Devin Townsend by request, and Watan, I guess is how you pronounce that, black metal band that got kicked out of the U.S. Let's see. And then the following Thursday, Scorpions, Whitesnake, UFO, Thunder, Philip Campbell, and the Bastard Sons. That's just one stage.
So that's the classic rock stage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you have on another stage, main stage number 2 is Wardruna, Halloween, and Danko Jones. Then Rise Against, Hangman's Chair, Therion, someone who you gave a good old thumbs down to this week. And I don't even know how to pronounce the name of this other band. It's a black metal logo.
Yeah, you can't read some of those, can you? They're always a little bit sort of scratchy, and you can never read the band name.
Yeah. And then on that Friday is Industrial Metal Fans' Delight, because you have 9 Inch Nails and Ministry, who I don't know if they've ever played together. The next stage is actually Megadeth is playing 2 days. So Alice Cooper and Megadeth. Bad Religion, who is playing Spain. I posted about that last week. Let's see, Atari Teenage Riot, who I didn't even know was still together, Decapitated, and Enslaved. Actually, Airborne is another one that's playing 2 days. So Guns N' Roses, Airborne, and then Nightwish Epica. Nightwish Epica, Blind Guardian, Eleventia, Symphony X. I mean, this is symphonic metal heaven for a lot of people. That stage. Then let's see. Wow, The Exploited and Discharge. Convergence, Blood Moon. Don't know who that is. Catatonia and In Extremo. Then to close out on Sunday, Metallica and Black Label Society. On another stage, Sabaton and Bring Me the Horizon, Hatebreed, Monster Magnet, Carcass, and Merciful Fate. So, I mean, outside of maybe Maiden and Kiss, Motley Crue, Def Leppard, outside of those 4 bands, everyone else is here.
Yep. Can you imagine the backstage? Everybody mixing backstage. That could be it could be quite interesting.
That's crazy. The other thing is, which is interesting, is Gary Clark Jr., who's opening up for Guns N' Roses, is more of like a blues player.
Yeah. I've seen him actually supporting Eric Clapton.
So here we go. That date is Guns N' Roses, Airborne, Miles Kennedy, who you have to think Slash will play something with him. Gary Clark Jr., Aaron Jones, Michael Monroe, and Dirty Honey. So if you take any one of these just stages alone, you could you could build a festival just on that. One of these smallish festivals. Well, smallish. Anything with Guns N' Roses or Metallica on it isn't exactly small, but
I'd worry going to this festival that I'm not going to eat anything because there's no way I'd be queuing up. I'd need to be watching so many bands.
Right. This festival might actually be closer to you than it is to me because I was looking at it where it was in France.
Yeah.
And it's fairly close to England.
Yeah, is it Clisson? It's a place called Clisson. I'm not sure where that is, though. I was going to look it up, but I haven't yet.
It's to the west of Rennes, I believe, and like an hour and something south of Paris. So I'm sure you could just take the tube over, and it's probably not that far. And if not, I mean, obviously, Charles de Gaulle has a lot of connections with the UK when it comes to flights. So
yeah. I'm very tempted to go to this. Just simply, you have to be there because it's going to be the one that you'll always remember.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned. I don't remember if I think I mentioned it to Mark on his podcast, but we were looking at tickets, which Johan had mentioned, where Bad Religion and Suicidal Tendencies were playing. And I was like, cool, my kids have been jonesing to go see a show. I said, perfect. It's only about 40 minutes away. This would be the perfect intro for them to a show because I could see my oldest son having no issue being at a full day at a festival, but my youngest son is a little bit crankier, so it may be a little bit more difficult. So it would be kind of like the test to see what it would be like. And then I started adding up tickets, and then with the COVID precautions, that it already says right at the bottom that you have to take a PCR test before going, and you have to show a vaccination passport and this, that, and the other thing. And I started adding fees up, and it came out to like 400 euros. So it's
yeah.
I was like,
this is going to be the same thing if I go to France, but even next year, we're going to have to take a PCR test, and we're going to have to pay for it. And that's not going to be a cheap gig either. I mean, that all those bands on, you're going to expect to pay a lot of money for it.
Right.
It's getting very pricey to go and see shows nowadays. I mean, I'm lucky really that Bloodstock Festival was only £69 for the day, which I thought was pretty good value.
That's not bad.
Yeah, and there's a good bill on, Judas Priest, Diamond Head Saxon, and others that I'll watch. So I thought that was okay. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this is going to be pricey. And of course, the exchange rate as well for us is can be a problem as well.
Is that, well, I mean, from pounds to euros, it's the exchange rate is usually okay, but I mean, well,
you don't know what it's going to be. That's the other thing. But the other thing is that you find that the Eurozone is just pricey per se for people from the UK, or it has been. So if you go on holiday and you buy a beer or you buy a meal, things are quite, or coffee, it's quite pricey. And that's always stopped me from going to Sweden to festivals as well, because Sweden's even costlier than France or Germany. Scandinavia is very pricey.
That's that was one of the selling points with the Resurrection Festival here in Spain, is that the promoters were trying to say that the weekend here, the way that everything is structured and how it, since it isn't like a small fishing town, it's a lot more reasonable in price than a lot of the other festivals. So that's part of the part of their way of selling it to people. So I've always found that was kind of interesting.
I mean, we've got a local little festival. I think you sort of I sent you the link to it, and you had a quick look at it. Called Rockwich, which is on
Right.
in Northwich, which is just my local town, and there's 17 bands on, all smallish bands, and it's £24, and you can go and watch that all day, but you can go the day before to watch the acoustic set as well.
Right.
And I think it's very cheap if you want to camp there, but they'll have no more than 100 people. I mean, this is a really small thing. It's done for mainly for charity. The bands are not making any money out of this, but they'll raise their profile a bit and sell maybe some CDs. But that's a great little local festival, and it's great to you could take your kids to that and get them into rock, which is always a good thing.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. The camping situation is always fun here.
Right.
I remember, I think the first Sonosphere we went to down in Madrid, it was something like 45 degrees Celsius at night. It was extremely hot, and I don't sleep well to begin with. I was roasting in a tent, and I remember when we came in, I saw a hotel, and first I went to the trailer that had all the showers, and it looked like a scene out of Apocalypse Now, where the water was all like knee height. I'm like, I'm gonna step in that, and I'm gonna automatically come out with like 7 different infections. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna forego this. So I walk over to the hotel, and the guy says to me, he goes, "What are you looking for? A room just for one person?" Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, this room, the biggest issue is that the people that stay here always complain that the air conditioning is too cold. I'm like, are you kidding me? Yes, please. Well, it's going to be, I can give it to you. It's still going to be a little expensive. It's going to be about 85 euros. I'm like, that to me is cheap right now. I'm roasting. I want the AC. I want a nice clean bathroom and a shower, and I'll be back at the festival the following day. And sure enough, I rested up, and I got there in time to see Alice in Chains. So it worked out wonderfully.
Yeah. We have the opposite problem, of course. We have the rain and the cold. I mean, I've been at Download once where I wasn't actually camping that day, but I can tell you this is in June, which is supposed to be the height of summer. And right. I had on a coat, a scarf, a hat, and gloves. It was so cold.
Yeah.
When the wind and rain blows in on that field, it's terrible. I don't know how people camp there sometimes. When the mud and their tents are just blown away. I mean, they've got nowhere to sleep.
Yeah, that's terrible. I've had at a campsite had a tent blow away before, and it's not fun. So I can't even imagine. Even after a show, you're going back and you're tired, and you got to wrestle with the tent for some time. Not ideal. Yeah, our weather. I mean, since I am in the north, it is similar to what it's like in the UK. Obviously, not as it rains a lot, but not as much as you guys get. So, I mean, I can sympathize with you. Johan was telling me before that they're in a heat wave up in Sweden.
Right.
And I responded like, well, it's raining here like usual.
We've been fortunate, actually. We've had some good weather there over the last 3 or 4 weeks. In fact, today it cooled down a little bit, but it's been very nice. As you can probably tell by my nose, it's all bright red in the sun. So I've caught the sun a little bit, but it's been nice.
Yeah, we've had thunderstorms since Monday. We've had thunderstorms off and on. So, soon on Patreon, we have to start to talk about our albums of the first half of the year. We're almost done with June, and we will officially be done with the first part of the year. Do you have any early front runners for
Yeah,
a favorite?
the Witherfall album.
Okay.
That I can't remember when that came out now. It's quite a while back, isn't it? Is that January, February time? It's
Yeah,
early in
it's
the
somewhere
year, isn't
around
it?
there. Yeah.
Yeah. That to me was a really, really good album. And the more you listen to it as well, the more you get into it.
Right.
Really like that one. I quite like the Evergrey album. In fact, I was playing it earlier this evening.
Okay.
So that was good. I bought the Arion album. I haven't played that as much yet, so I need to sort of
Okay.
listen to that a bit more. I really like the Alice Cooper album that came out.
Okay.
I thought that was good. I know that's had a bit of a mixed reaction. I'm not a die-hard Alice Cooper fan, I'd have to say. You know, I've not
Hmm.
followed his career so much in the past, apart from his hits. But I liked it. I thought it was a good mix of songs. Just trying to think who else was released now. I have bought quite a few this year. But I'd go with those so far. Maybe you
Okay.
can come in with a few. Remind me what's come out.
Yeah, I did want to comment real quick about what you just said about Alice Cooper, where I think a lot of times if you're not a diehard of a band, a lot of time you're more susceptible to accepting certain albums.
Yeah,
With Alice Cooper, I've had that same reaction where I like Alice Cooper, but I'm not a fanatic. And a lot of his albums, specifically his last few albums, I've enjoyed. I thought that they were solid albums where, I know that a lot of the diehards kind of have crapped on them because they've wanted, certain things out of him. But I think Alice has toyed around with so many styles of rock and metal that he's always got a few decent songs off of each album, so with
mm,
that
mm,
I'm usually happy. I really like that Witherfall album.
yeah,
So I mean, if I had to choose anything right now, it would probably be that. Let me
yeah.
pull up my
I think that's going to definitely be in my top three by the end of the year. I can't see anything pushing it out at the moment, but I'm really looking forward to the KK Downing album, which is coming out, the KK Priest album.
right,
Because I've heard a couple of tracks so far. The second track was released this week, and it was
right,
very painkiller, but it was good. It was good. It was what I wanted to hear,
right,
and I think that they're really pushing Judas Priest, and they're really sort of saying this is how Priest should maybe sound. So I think
right.
there's going to be a nice bit of competition between the bands, and that's good.
Well,
Um,
I think if you look at it, I really like Firepower. I think that is a really good album.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so I think with him coming out with, I mean, I've only heard the one song. I have the second song put aside because I wanted to add it to Patreon this weekend.
right.
Um,
Yeah, I think because I pre-ordered the album, they sent me a link to it straight away, and
okay.
so I heard it this week.
Yeah,
So
so that's a great point. That's something that when Rob Halford came back to the band, I was pleased with what he was doing as Halford. I like
mm,
those two albums, and I like the Jugulator album, but I really, really like the Demolition album with Ripper. So
mm,
when he came back to the fold, I was expecting something different with Angel of Retribution. It's not that album is bad, but I was expecting a
mm,
lot more from it. And to me,
mm.
what I was looking for, I finally got with Firepower.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Firepower is a fantastic album. I like Angel of Retribution. I think that if you listen to it again since and listen to it with different ears, I really like it. I really like it, and I do play it. Well, not I wouldn't say that often. Maybe once every 6 months, once a year.
Right.
But when I play it, I really like it. But of course they've released a couple of other albums that were terrible,
Yeah.
or not up to scratch. I'd say not up to their usual standard.
Right.
And the Nostradamus album. I mean,
Terrible.
it is. It's awful. It's awful. I mean, I don't even know why I've got it in my collection. I really should just take it out.
Yeah.
Pretend it never happened.
I've never seen people run to the bathrooms or the concession stands faster at a show than Priest playing songs off of Nostradamus, because I saw them on the Nostradamus tour, and of course they opened with the song Nostradamus, so people didn't go anywhere. But once they said, we're going to play another one off of our latest album, it was like, shoom, people were just like running. They were sprinting to get out of there. And then the following tour, the Epitaph tour, which is the one where I saw them with Saxon and Motorhead, is, you know, they played the Sentinel, they played geez, what song did they play off of Point of Entry? Because it wasn't heading out to the highway. It may have been Solar Angels is the name of the song, maybe. They played something off of Ram It Down as well. And then we're going to play Doom off of our last studio album, Nostradamus. It was as if the floor section just cleared out. It was ridiculous. I've never seen that before.
I can't understand how a band could actually record something and not distance themselves from it and realize how bad it is. I mean, maybe because they're so, you know, they've created it, they've created the songs, and they've recorded it, and they've put a lot of effort into it, a lot of time and effort. I even think I've read somewhere KK Downing actually thinks it's good. And I respect KK. I think he's a great individual, and I met him, and he signed my jacket, and we've had a little mini chat. But I can't understand why you would think that is anything that people would enjoy listening to.
I've had run-ins with their management and with their PR, so I will tell you my what I think off air. But
yeah,
there's when Halford came back into the band, and he shifted away from who kind of guided him in a direction to get back to doing metal stuff. And not that I didn't like what he was doing before Halford, because I do like songs off of the 2 album. I do like Fight. But I do think, I mean, I love the song Judas is Rising.
Yeah.
But the song Revolution is a complete rip off of Jane's Addiction song. The bass part is identical to Jane's Addiction's Mountain song. And that's like the main like riff going throughout the song. I just felt that album was okay. We need a song that sounds like it came off of British Steel, so let's write this one. We need one that sounds like it came off of Painkiller, so let's do this track.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas,
yeah,
you know, with the KK's Priest stuff, it seemed like right out of the gates, okay, we're going to focus on this. We're going to be heavy. We're going to be punishing. And we want to show, like you said before, we want to show people this is how it needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm looking through my 2021 list here. I mean, I really like that Witherfall album. I really enjoyed the Gojira, which recently came out. The End Machine had some decent songs on it.
Yeah, I've actually bought that one. Yeah, I forgot about that one. I listened to it last week. Yeah, it's good. It's good. I wouldn't say it's in my top 5, but I would say
it's still solid.
It's in the top 10. Yeah.
Yeah. I know this is a little outside of the box, but we've talked about them before. Royal Blood, I really like the new album as well. Not exactly hard rock or metal. It's probably the most distant from a hard rock sound that maybe they had on that first album, but I think it's still
it's a good
worth
album
a listen to.
And of course, Sumo Psycho is the other one. I bought that one, and that's a great album.
Yeah, I like that. I like the Tetrarch album as well. I thought that was pretty solid. Let's see. And there are a few others that I want to still check out that we'd talked about on Patreon. For example, the album by the group Vola, which the few songs that I posted sounded pretty cool. I was listening to the Interloper album today as well.
Yeah.
And and the Danko Jones looks like the singles that I've heard sound really, really good off of that so far. The funny thing with Danko is I either really love his stuff or it does nothing for me. There's like no in between. It's either all in or it does nothing. I mean, it's he just does that to me. But the songs that I really love by him, I need to play constantly. Like they get in your head, and I just need to hear them all the time. So
yeah, that new stuff does sound really good.
yeah, I would agree.
There's been an incredible amount of good music, I think, so far, and I
Yes.
probably because there's been the lockdowns and everybody's been at
Right.
home and creating music, which has been is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. And there are a few others in here that I really have to check out more. I've been meaning to check out the Todd Latore album. I've only heard like 2 songs off of that.
Yeah, I listened to it once, I think, and it's another one I should go back to again. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The Damon Johnson album as well is something that I want to check out. But that had kind of a weird like distribution because it was supposed to come out a month before it actually came out, and then it was distributed by him, so it was kind of weird. I mean, the whole
I've got a copy of that one, and I play that one quite a bit. I totally forgotten that to come out this year. I was thinking that was the tail end of last year. So yeah, that would be in my top 3. It's a really good album, really solid album.
Yeah, you know what it is he released songs off of this, similar to the Dead Daisies, where there are a few songs that they released last year, but the full album came out this year.
Yeah, that's it. Well, in fact, it's not been released in the UK at all. I sort of clubbed in with a guy who I'd met on Twitter, and we said that we'd buy it from the US and share the import costs.
Oh,
so
okay.
we both got a CD, and of course he signed it as well, which was nice. And then
Cool.
we sort of mentioned it on Twitter, and he sort of Damon actually intervened and said, "Oh, glad thanks, and glad you're buying it."
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think we might have the only 2 copies in the UK.
Yeah, he seems to be a very very personable in the sense that if you tag him in certain things, he does seem to reply. It was one of the things. One of my pet peeves is going out and doing what I think is a great interview. Tagging band members or whatnot, and then nothing happens. There's someone that I interviewed a few months back where it was similar to that, where this person didn't share the interview, and then now they're sharing everything. It's like, wait a second. When I did my interview with you, which I thought was great, I heard nothing. So it's weird.
It's annoying.
Yeah. So anyway, I do want to thank you for coming in and saving the day tonight. It's kind of redundant, saving the day tonight, for saving the show, coming on and saving it.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk to you, and I appreciate your support, not only on Patreon but on social media. You're always tagging and resharing and always asking me about songs to pick for Fridays and whatnot, and I appreciate all your support. It is amazing that someone like yourself would take the time to do that. So I greatly appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, Victor. And I really like what you do. You are the metal professor, as I've mentioned many times on Twitter, because I like your knowledge, and I appreciate you all the contributions that you do. So it's great, and that's why I'm a Patreon member. And I hope we get some more people who join us, because we have great sort of chats and comments about all the music. It's great.
Yeah, it is awesome. Again, I always say we've got a small but great group. We're up to 9 people now.
Yeah.
We've got a solid block out of that contributes to the comments and to the videos, and that is awesome. So if anyone wants to jump on board, it is $2 a month, and you get a bonus podcast, and you get a ton of video content, and you get all types of questions and album of the week unboxing as well. And I'm working to up my game with that. I've been talking to Chris Vaglio, who is actually a patron as well. He used to have his own video production company. So I've been brainstorming with him as to how to kind of spruce up what I'm doing with that. So I've got a few things in mind for July, which I hope will come to fruition. It's all a matter of time.
Okay.
if I have enough time, I've got some pretty cool things planned out for it. So
yeah. Oh, that sounds exciting. Yeah. Sounds good.
So that's awesome. We're gonna wrap the show up here, folks. Thanks for everyone that was in the chat tonight. Rob Rowe, Gabriel, Jose, who I saw checked in for a moment there, Johan up in Sweden as well. If I missed anybody, I apologize. I also want to thank again the patrons, those that are usually here that for whatever reason are not here. You know, people have lives, folks. So I do, when people are here and actually are able to chat and come on board, I do appreciate it. And if you didn't get to watch us live, thank you for watching the replay. And with that, folks, we will end it here. See you next week right here on the Signals from Mars live stream